Welcome to our book club, Toxic Parents. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to read, it's been a couple of weeks that we haven't, right? First we analyzed Udasina, right, Shunya's mom, and then we saw Shunya. So now I want to bring it back to the book and read a little to kind of ground ourselves, because these points can be very triggering, and very upsetting, and sometimes you don't even realize it, and then during the week it hits you in some way, or you're feeling off and you don't even know why. So it's, we're hitting very deep core ingredients of your personality, and if it's not yours, it might be someone else's. You might be like, oh my God, that now I understand why he or she's like that, or why I'm like that, so I want to kind of take the microscope off of you guys now, and we'll take a breather and just read the book and look at other people for a little while. Okay. So I'm going to skip the questions. You can ask those yourself, okay? If you want to look at your relationships with your parents when you were a child, on page 7, there's questions 1 through 8. You can answer those yourself if you feel like you want to do some more deep digging this week. Also on page 8, there's questions about your adult life. There's 10 questions there. And then there's a section, the second half of page 8, your relationship with your parents as an adult. And then the author is saying, if you answered yes to even 1/3 of these questions, there's a great deal in this book that can help. So that's all you have to know. And probably already you have an idea of why you want to be here. You probably don't need to answer these questions to know. You're here for a reason. But it might help to give you some other ideas to pay attention to if you answer those questions. Okay? So I'm going to start reading from page 9, at the top there, that paragraph. So she said, even though some of the chapters may not seem relevant to your situation, it's important to remember that all toxic parents, regardless of the nature of their abuse, basically leave the same scars. So that's an interesting one, right? We haven't really analyzed all the different types, but they all leave, she's saying, basically the same scars. For example, your parents may not have been an alcoholic, but the chaos, instability, and loss of childhood that typify alcoholic homes are just as real for children of other types of toxic parents. The principles and techniques of recovery are similar for all adult children as well. So I urge you not to miss any of the chapters. And that oftentimes happens when I'm working individually with clients. They'll say, well, my father or my mother wasn't an alcoholic. And it's like, well, what they were doing was more subtle. So it's hard to actually realize that it was toxic. Because sometimes, if somebody's drinking and they're getting drunk the whole day, or something very obvious, even in that state, many of my clients will say, it wasn't that bad. Even when to you it'd be like so obvious, So it's very hard, for your little you, inner child you, to see your parent in any kind of bad light. So that's why, I think what this author is saying is good, Somehow there's a scar made, and we'll read about that, here. And you can also introspect on yourself. But it doesn't matter if they weren't an alcoholic, or if sometimes they'll say, well, they never hit me. They never physically abused me. So, they said something here or there, that was verbally. Every now and then they'd curse at me, but that's not that big of a deal. Or they'd, put me down about my weight, or they'd put me down about my brother's smarter than me, or they'd put me down, but it's true, but it was true what they said. So those all leave very deep scars, and chipping away at our sense of self-worth and self-confidence. Because the way we become confident is by how our parents make us see our good qualities. So if they're either invisible, like the neglectful type, and they're not even noticing you at all, or they're permissive, which means it's all about them. They're your friend, but for themselves. They're your buddy, but they're actually using you as somebody to tell other secrets to, and treat as a friend because they don't have any friends for whatever reason. So they're using you as that. So. And then the authoritarian, they're so strict and they're so cold that they can't really see you. So all 3 of those types, there will be some emotional scars there where you're not being seen, some way or the other, So let's see what she says here. She says, freeing yourself from the legacy of toxic parents. If you're an adult child of toxic parents, there are many things you can do to free yourself from their distorted legacy of guilt and self-doubt. I'll be discussing these various strategies throughout this book, and I want you to proceed with a great deal of hope. Not the deluded hope that your parents will magically change, but the realistic hope that you can psychologically unhook from the powerful and destructive influence of your parents. You just have to find the courage and it is within you. So that's actually another thing I was going to say is, so far what we've been reading, right, it can feel depressing, or it can feel overwhelming, like, am I going to even get out of this, be able to get out of this? I'm doomed, you know? And what she's saying, and also what I definitely agree with, is that this book can give you a lot of hope. Because just think of any problem you've ever had in your life. What is the first step? When you have a problem, what's the first step to get out of it? Yanshri?
To become aware of it.
Yes. Who said that? Oh, Mohini? Yes, that's right. To become aware of it, you have to see it, right? You got it. So you have to be able to see the problem. So that's what this book is helping to do, to become crystal clear aware. And just say you're like, believe me, I already know I had a problem with my parents. Okay, but what specifically is the problem, and how did it affect you? And how is it affecting you still today, you know? So that if you can reframe it in your head, that can give you hope. Like, okay, now I know my problem. So now I know very clearly this is it. This is how it is, and this is how I want to be. So what do I need to do to get there, you know? Okay. And then she said, not the deluded hope that your parents will magically change. So a lot of people will say, first of all, they'll say, my parents didn't have any problem. No problem with my parents. Then when they say, oh, my parents actually did have a problem, and then they start realizing, oh, it was a big problem. Oh my God, now I can't unsee the problem. I don't even want to talk to them, block. I don't want to, you know, like, wow, when you see it, it's really hard to unsee it, right? So then what? You know, then usually the next step is, now let me explain to them their problem, because they need to change, damn it. I mean, I'm perfect. They just need to change. I need to explain to them very clearly that they're being X, Y, and Z. And, you know, I learned in my conscious communication class, I should say how it made me feel. So, Mom, when you, dump all your problems on me, it makes me feel overwhelmed and angry. I mean, how is she going to respond to that, you know? So that's where we go wrong, you know? It's like, check, yes, good job. We are aware of the problem. Yay, you know? Okay, now we see specifically there is something wrong with them. And they did hurt me. But then we still want to go out to them and now change them. And that's so frustrating when we realize, oh my God, they are not going to change. And oh my God, they've been doing this since the beginning of time. When you wake up, it's like you're waking up from almost like it feels like you're in a dream, a bad dream or something, when you can then see it clearly and go, oh my God. Because then you see, like, every time they're always talking about themselves or whatever their thing is. And it becomes really aggravating and hard to control your tongue and not say something. Not just, you know, it's really hard to, you know, so that's a very small sentence she wrote, but a very big point about this delusion. So the hope shouldn't be that one day I can have a really wonderful relationship with my mother who was neglectful. You know, one day you can have a really wonderful relationship with yourself as the nurturing mother to your inner child. And then guess what? It won't matter how your mother is. She talks about herself the whole time, who cares? You've already nurtured your inner child, you know? So it's good to get clear on what our goal is eventually too. Because if we're reading this book, Toxic Parents, and then it says, overcoming their hurtful legacy and reclaiming your life. It doesn't say, and changing them to do that or anything. You have to reclaim your life. Why? Because you have to change, you know? So that's important to also see. Like, imagine that there's like a snake in the garden here, you know? You're not going to go over and get the snake and be like, listen, I wish you could just be a little kitty cat. You could be a little kitten. Let me hold you like a baby. Oh, you know, you're not going to do that. You're going to go snake. And what will you do if you see a snake, a dangerous snake? Caution, avoid, go around the other way, leave the garden altogether. So you have to see, once you can clearly see who's in front of you, who was your mother or father, adjust yourself. Maybe go out of the garden altogether. Maybe get a shovel and hit it on the head. I don't know. Or call somebody and have them get it away from you. But definitely you're not going to go try to snuggle with the snake and talk some sense into it. Right? Okay. So that's this magical thinking, which I was saying last week is like this fantasy relationship. You have this fantasy happy ending. And if you don't see that clearly, you're going to not only try to create it for your parents, or at least hope for that, you're going to try to create it with all the people in your current life that are mimicking that parent. You know? Okay, so she said, you have the courage within you. Then she said, I'll be guiding you through a series of steps that will help you see this influence clearly and then deal with it, regardless of whether you're currently in conflict with your parents, whether you have a civil but surface relationship, whether you haven't seen them for years, or even if one or both of them are dead. Strange as it may seem, people are still controlled by their parents after their deaths. So this is one of those sentences that Babaji underlined in red. Where do I put it, Vilas, so you can see? Here? Huh? My face? Okay. Where is it? He's down here. So Babaji underlined that in red. Strange as it may seem, many people are still controlled by their parents after their deaths. So what that's called is a samskara. That's our samskaras in Vedic psychology terminology. So that means that it doesn't matter if mom or dad is dead or alive. If they're living in the same house as you, or if they're living far away and you see them every 10 years, or they've died 20 years ago. The samskara, the memory or the impression put in your chitta, right, your subconscious mind, it's all there, alive and well. And that's what's bothering you. You know, because a lot of people will say, oh, I have a great relationship with my mom now. She's changed so much. That has nothing to do with the samskaras that were created in the first 7 to 10 years of your life. You know? I mean, even if you think at a physical level, just imagine like your arm was broken. And now you're like, well, now it's not. It's like, yeah, but it was. And you can still probably see the scar from that. So, and she did it. If she broke your arm, it doesn't matter that she's changed. She broke your arm. So leaves a very deep impression in you. And those samskaras are what, this is why, and that's why Babaji underlined it, because it's the whole point. They don't know what a samskara is. This doctor didn't know, but that's what it is. Because if you think about it, if we really think the problem is the other person, you know how we're saying, if my mom would just change, if she'd stop being so self-absorbed, if she'd just get herself into therapy, and be more introspective, be more empathetic, my life could be so much easier, right? But the thing is that okay, let's imagine she did that. So then you should also be getting better. If she gets better, you should get better. If she's hungry and she eats, then you should feel full, right? That's the logic. It doesn't make sense. So if she gets better, wonderful, that's on her. That is not going to change the damage that's been done to you in your childhood. That's like baked into you. And so that's an important thing to realize, that we want so much for them to get better. And that's why this doctor's saying, whether they're alive or not, you can heal it. Because the healing is you realizing what the damage they did and not talking to them about it, actually nurturing your inner child in the ways that she or he didn't get what she or he needed, So that's the good news. We don't need them to change in any way or to be there or to apologize, nothing. We can take care of it ourselves. But if we're not aware of that, this idea that many people are still controlled by their parents after their death is very true. The ghosts that haunt them may not be real in a supernatural sense, but they're very real in a psychological one. A parent's demands, expectations, and guilt trips can linger long after that parent has died. So that's what a samskara is. I mean, there's many types of samskaras, but the category of toxic parents are the ones where they have made you feel bad about something that shouldn't be your fault, or take responsibilities for something that's not yours, or have really high expectations, and so no matter what you do, you get straight A's in school, that's not good enough. You should do better. You should, so that's all very deep in you. And those are your kind of like almost operating principles for life, is what they put into you all that time ago. And you cannot see it differently. For those of you guys who are in some of the groups with me, you're already starting to see how people see things. And you're like, how could they see it like that? I was trying to say something positive. How did you see that as negative? What? And we're just doing basics. You don't even know each other. So imagine if someone that you know and how loaded that will be. It's amazing, what you see, how you see people through the lens of your parents' demands, expectations, guilt trips, all that. You may already have recognized your need to free yourself from your parents' influence. Maybe you've even confronted them about it. How many people have done that? Have you ever confronted your parent about something that they did to you in the childhood, or that they're doing to you now, right? It feels so good when you're going to do it too. You're like, yeah, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to show them, and they're going to get it. And it's shocking, their response, right? It's so rare. I don't think I've ever heard of a parent being like, oh my God, you're totally right. I screwed up. I was the worst. I can't believe I did that to you. I completely neglected you. What was I thinking? It doesn't go like that, right? It re-injures you, because they slap back even harder. You don't know what I went through. You don't know the childhood I had, and they go on, and you're like, okay. Your inner child even feels more neglected and hurt, right? Okay. You may already have recognized your need to free yourself from your parents' influence. Maybe you've even confronted them about it. One of my clients was fond of saying, quote, my parents don't have any control over my life. I hate them and they know it. Do you think the parents have control over their life? If you say, they don't have any control, but I hate my parents and they know it. No, they don't have any control over my life. Well, I think they kind of do. But she came to realize, the client came to realize, that by fanning the flames of her anger, her parents were still manipulating her. And the energy she put into her anger was a drain on other parts of her life. So this anger is, you know that saying, if being angry at someone is like, you're drinking poison and thinking you're hurting them. Anger and hatred is so draining, and it takes so much energy to hold on to that anger and hatred towards someone, right? So this idea that they know I hate them, so it's like, so I'm triumphant. It's like you're poisoning yourself, basically, But that's an easier emotion for most people than what's hiding underneath there, which is usually a depression and a sadness and a just defeated. Anger is more like passionate and rajasic, like I'm angry, you can at least feel I'm something, but with the depression, it's like, forget about living, I'm just so defeated by them, and that you lose motivation. So sometimes in therapy, when the person's angry, I'll let them vent it out. Tell me more, turn it up, what would you do? And then all of a sudden underneath that, they burst into tears because we hit the sadness that was under there, So neither of those are good. You don't want your parents to be pressing your buttons like that all the time. Confrontation is an important step in exorcising the ghosts of the past and the demons of the present, but it must never be done in the heat of the anger. So this is Babaji underlining that again. Never confront in the heat of the anger, although it's important to do it. Oh, sorry, like this. Yeah, so that's his red underline. Confrontation is an important step in exorcising the ghosts of the past, which means getting rid of those samskaras, right? And the demons of the present, but it must never be done in the heat of anger. So that's very hard to do, right? When you realize what your parent did or didn't do for you that they should have or shouldn't have, it's like really maddening to see what an injustice your childhood was, that maybe they didn't stand up for you. Maybe there's somebody who bullied you or sexually abused you. Maybe there's somebody who, maybe your dad didn't ever play with you. I mean, there's so many things that might seem mild. There's nothing that's mild. There's a checklist of how they should behave, That's our ideal father course. Babaji explains each characteristic of the ideal father, and then we have a different e-course on the nurturing, on the mother, what she should be. And he's laid out the ingredients according to the Vedic scriptures of here's what mother should do, here's what father should do. So when you look down, you can check yourself. Did I get that one from dad? Nope. That one? Nope. That one? Nope. That can piss you off if you let yourself really feel what was missing. And then you see, so then how did I behave? Either I had no confidence, I didn't think I was being even worthy of being played with, or whatever the thing is that they left out, that can make you become very angry and want to confront. And if you don't do it, just say you don't confront, the anger is going to come out sideways. That's how I describe it. It won't come out directly at your father, but it'll come out to some man who mimics your father, who makes you feel in the similar way that your father did. He could look nothing like your father, but the way he acts, this dismissive way, making you feel inadequate or something, really he has his own set of some scars, probably because he's feeling inadequate. So he wants to make you feel inadequate, most likely because he's threatened by you because you're too adequate, So then out of jealousy, he'll try to make you feel how he's feeling, which is inadequate, which is so strange. But we don't see that because our inner child gets triggered and we think, that's it, I'm going to show him. So we react like knee-jerk because we're pissed at our dad for never seeing us. I know that was very fast what I said, but that's going on all the time. Our mind is going that fast. Those samskaras work automatically all the time. We don't even have to think about it. And out of the 4 parts of the mind, the only part that can actually think, and can control it is the buddhi, your discriminating faculty. So that's your awareness. That's the part that you have to see the other parts and go, hold on, oh, that's my inner child freaking out over there. Let me nurture him or her, but I'm not going to act on that. That's my emotional mind. Yes, Vila?
So, could you explain what this means, confrontation is good? Because just now I understood that we don't confront the parents.
Right. So who do you confront? And how?
Yeah, could you maybe explain what you mean with that?
So you confront the people, the parents, in a therapeutic session without them, through a letter or through this empty chair, technique where you pull up a chair and say, let's bring in your father's energy, show me the picture, now tell him off. What do you need to say? So confrontation is good, but in the realms of what's safe and therapeutic. Make sense? Thank you. We got no AC today, so Vilas is going to bring a little fan over. I think it's 106 degrees. I don't know. Thank you. Thank you very much. Huh? Will this mess up the recording if I put it too close? Probably. Okay. Okay. Sorry. For anybody who's in a place that's cold right now, send us some of that. We've got 106 here. I think, Christy, I see you in New Hampshire. Is it cool there? It's cold. Send some cool Nordic air. Okay. Okay. We're going to cover it up so maybe we can put the AC a little closer. That's the fan a little. Thank you. Okay. Good. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so we talked about confrontation, right? That you confront the person in your therapy session with your therapist. They'll guide you through that. Okay? Oh yeah, so this client was saying, oh, my parents don't have any control over my life. I hate them, and they know it. So that means that they're really controlling you a lot. That means that you can't even have peace at all from what they did probably a long time ago. And now they're triggering you still probably. I mean, not from the old stuff, but also if you're going to dinner with them, they're probably going to trigger you there too, doing the same thing. Is this okay, Vilas, or should I move it? It's okay. Okay. Okay, so we talked about confrontation. So then it says, aren't I supposed to be responsible for the way I am? By now you may be thinking, wait a minute, Susan. Almost all the other books and experts say I can't blame anybody else for my problems. Baloney. You know what that means? If English is not your native tongue, it means like BS, bakwas, bullshit, kind of like, no. Your parents are accountable for what they did. They should be held up accountable. Of course you're responsible for your adult life, but that life was largely shaped by experiences over which you had no control. The fact is, you are not responsible for what was done to you as a defenseless child. You are responsible for taking positive steps to do something about it now. This is huge, you guys. This gets so confused, if you're not under the guidance of a therapist. It gets very confusing, because that's what I was saying. Once you realize what they did, you're pissed at them and you want to tell them off, or you're like, I'm never talking to them again, or that you have some very strong reaction, which is normal. It's or you feel so depressed, or you feel anxious, or whatever feelings come. That's normal to have strong reactions, and they are responsible for what they did to you. But the problem is they can't take responsibility for it. That's the hard part. So yes, it's their fault. They did something that was not appropriate to you, that hurt you. That we can't undo. I mean, we can't now go tell them and then they're going to apologize and they're going to say, I'm sorry for that. So, but they are responsible. It's not that it's not their fault. It's just that first you have to see that, and then you have to realize they did that to me, but now I'm with me. I have me and my adult self and my inner child, so I have to take care of me in the ways that they didn't. So it's not their job to go back. You don't go back to the original person who hurt you and be like, you now make me feel good. And that's where we get tripped up. Or, I have some clients who they've been in therapy for years and they're still talking about what their father did to them. So that's if you're in the mode of tamas, and if you're depressed, you get stuck. And you get stuck in this repetitive loop, and it's called ruminating. You just keep thinking about it, and you keep going over, and it's like, that's when you get stuck in therapy, because it's like, yes, we know what your father did, and yes, we've nurtured your inner child, and we've been nurturing your inner child, and we've been talking about what your father did for a few years now. So that's when that's when you're still acting like an inner child, but you're the adult. You're not seeing that you need to also be the adult and take your inner child out, because it can't be my job every week. I mean, I do it and I'm modeling it to you, but then you have to understand, I need to learn how to do it myself, and I can't keep getting trapped in my inner child's depression and keep saying how bad that my father was, how bad my father was, because what you're actually doing is you're reinforcing, you're making it too strong. You're reinforcing the original bad father in you, and we don't want to make your inner child think that that's a helpful thing. But we also don't want to go the other way and talk about it once in therapy and be like, okay, we talked about how bad he was, because some clients do that. They'll say, yeah, I realized my dad was bad, and they'll say like 3 points and be like, okay, I'm done. And now let's move on. I want to tell you all the good points about how good he was. And it's like, no, we need to spend quite a bit of time unpacking what he did or she did, or and how they made you feel and how it affected you and how it's affecting you now. That's not a small process, And then there's some clients who actually don't talk about their parents at all. They're going to come to therapy, and even though they're struggling, they'll talk about other things. They'll talk about their current life. And normally therapy starts like that. You come in and there's something bothering you. I'm having a hard time with my boss. I'm having a hard time with whatever. I'm feeling anxious, whatever the thing is. But as you mature in your therapy, you're supposed to go into the depth of what the root of the problem is, And it depends also on the type of therapist you work with. Some therapists are designed just to help you with the current. And just imagine you have anxiety. They're going to be really good with like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. They're going to help you with your behavior and how your thoughts and behavior are troubling you in a way, and how to manage them better. They're not going to go into the root childhood samskara, So you also have to figure out what you are looking for in this moment, and then what type of therapist matches that. But this cognitive behavioral therapy and lots of other types of therapy, that's what they're designed to do. We don't want to criticize those. Those are great. You need the in the moment what I do type of thing. But it's not going to remove that samskara, which is the root that's driving those thoughts and feelings. So that eventually needs to get done. Otherwise, you can do good cognitive behavioral, but still that samskara is going to flare up when you get somebody who's mimicking your mother or father. And all of a sudden the cognitive behavioral therapy just goes out the window. And you're like, why? Why? It's because the samskara hasn't been addressed. The root program hasn't been addressed. You're putting new ones in there. You're putting new samskaras in when you do this cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, but the old one is still there, and it's very strong. When that one got made, the original one, when you were young, that has the most intensity and the most depth, because you had no discriminating power. It just came in straight, and you took it as, this is a truth, an undeniable truth. I am unworthy of love. I'm an uninteresting person. I shouldn't speak up, and I can't do much with my life, for example, if you had a neglectful parent, So that's going to be very hard to change with anything you're doing at the adult, that thinking is going to be very hard to change. Even if you do positive affirmations or rewiring how you think, but you have to actually go all the way back to find your inner child. Where is he or she, and where do they need to be picked up by you and rescued from that situation? It's a little esoteric if you haven't done the inner child work, but I'm just trying to say this because sometimes people will say, but I've been in therapy for years and I don't feel like I'm getting to that point. It might be the type of therapy you're doing, You need to work with somebody who works with the inner child to really heal it. Okay. So what can this book do for you? We are beginning an important journey together. It is a journey of truth and discovery. At its end, you will find yourself far more in charge of your life than ever before. I'm not going to make grandiose assurances about your problems disappearing magically overnight. But if you have the courage and strength to do the work in this book, you'll be able to reclaim from your parents much of the power due you as an adult, and most of the dignity due you as a human being. This work does carry an emotional price tag. Once you peel away your defenses, you'll discover feelings of rage, anxiety, hurt, confusion, and especially grief. It's very sad, actually, the grief part is very heavy when you realize, oh my God, she or he wasn't really there for me. And sometimes it's even worse than that. It's like sometimes parents are actually even jealous of their own child. Or they were sexually attracted to their own child, or something so far off, and you're like, and once you're an adult, and then you think, could I ever do that to my own kid? What were they even thinking? What mental state must have been in? So when you really see them for what they went through, without sugarcoating it by being like, but she had such a hard life, she lived in the country, 4 kids that she raised by herself, and the husband was away and he was cheating on her, so of course whatever the song and dance is that their story is, I am sorry that your parent had a difficult childhood or a difficult situation, but that is not an excuse for what they did to you. And that's where we have to catch ourselves. Oftentimes we know our parents' story better than our own. We are experts at our, you don't know what happened to my mom. Let me tell you, when she was 14, this happened. When she was 10, that happened. When she was 9, you know the whole blow by blow. And why? Because you've over-identified with her and her trauma and what she's been through, or your father. But when I ask you about you, you're like, my child was pretty good. Why? Because you're totally focused on her. You didn't even realize what she was doing to you. You became her therapist at age 9, or her sounding board, or her one who absorbed everything for her, you know? So anyway, so the grief does come when you realize, whoa, they were really not there for me in some very significant ways that I needed. You know, that's really painful to realize that. And usually when something painful happens and you're in a relationship with someone, you want to talk about it with them. You want to go and say, this hurt and that hurt. And that's why I'm saying this is also why it's painful, because they're not the person you thought they were. And you can't have the emotionally intelligent kind of conversation you might want to have with them. You know? So it leaves you also feeling kind of lonely and just like feels a little disorienting, you know? Because the people you're born into life, those are your those are the pillars. Those are your foundations of your home. And when one of them gets shaky and you start seeing it, you're like, whoa, you know, your whole identity starts changing when you look at it.
Could you give us some idea, just a rough idea of what would be appropriate to know about the parents' story? Like, I'm wondering, how can I see, is this maybe a red flag that, oh, that much detail would be too inappropriate, or that much knowledge about the parent is kind of a red flag and shows, oh, probably,
boundary issue. Yeah.
Exactly, probably boundary
Yeah.
issue, probably he became, his therapist or whatever,
Not much. You shouldn't know that much about any of their trauma or their person until once you're a fully formed adult, like 20 plus, you're out of the house, maybe even done with college if you go to college, you're in your 20s, you are solid, then you might be out for a cup of tea and you might be like, just say dating somebody and it's going really bad for you, and they'll be like, oh, then they can treat you like a friend. But all those other years, they are supposed to be there for you. That means they can't be dumping their dirty laundry on you. So you shouldn't know much. I mean, unless, just say they have a seizure in front of you, or they have an allergy to something. You can't, they can't help, but otherwise, it's private. Why should a kid know that? So not much about their trauma or their pain or any of that stuff. That's an adult conversation. So you should know them as your caregivers, as your well-wishers, as them really focused on you and what you need. There's a boundary there about all their personal stuff. That's for their therapist, not for you guys as kids. Unless, like I said, it's something physical that they can't. But even if they're having depression, some parents have depression, right? And they're on the couch and they can't get out of bed. That needs to be dealt with by the other parent quickly. It shouldn't be going on and being accepted in the family. It does a lot of damage to the kids, having a mentally unwell parent that's not being treated. But usually what happens is it's the elephant in the room and nobody says anything. Well, mom was kind of depressed. She had her spells sometimes for a few months when she didn't get out of the bed or she couldn't do anything. It just depends on how it goes. But that sends a very strong message to the kid that mom's feelings are more important than the child. So there's many things, even mental health things, that should be addressed right away, and that the healthier parent needs to explain to the child. Mom is going through this thing right now, but it's nothing you said, it's nothing you did, and you're not responsible for taking care of her feelings, and we're going to meet the doctor and she's going to get some medicine, and maybe hire a caregiver to kind of help for the role of mom. Something, the kids need to have stable, emotionally stable parents that do not share too much about their life. Even if it's something current going on with their work. Why should a kid know that? The kid needs stability. So the kid needs to come home and the father needs to be there and play with them and do their homework, and the mother needs to be making the meal, and they need to be having a peaceful dinner. And at dinner the parents are saying, what was the highlight of your day, sweetie? Even if literally the mom, whatever, it shouldn't be known. Why would that be dumped onto the kid who barely is learning about how to deal with even their own bodily functions, let alone their own feelings and how to make friends? Yeah. What do you think? Shocking? Yeah, it's a lot. Parents are usually not very considerate to their really actually how much they affect a kid, because then what do you think the kid thinks? Either I'm bad and I'm wrong, I did it, or I'm responsible, I gotta help, or both. You know, so then all of a sudden their natural development, where they, if their parents were stable, emotionally stable and had good boundaries, every night the kids would be sharing what they're doing and what the exciting thing of their day was. And that's also how the parents learn about the kid's swabhava, the kid, you know, what their nature is, because every day the kid keeps coming home with artwork and saying, look what I made, look what I made. And they're like, you seem to really like art. Yes, I do. And then the parents say, show me the other one. And so the child learns that every day they go out and they have an adventure at school with their friends, at sports or something, you know, and then they come home and this is their safe place to share from their day. And the parents are supposed to listen, ask questions, point out their strengths. And if the child is worried about something, then the parents are supposed to validate that and hear about that. And then if there's siblings, there should be time for each child to speak. So then the parents are validating they're learning how to share, how to empathize and all that. But it's not about dad's hard day at the office. You know, or mom's emotional about something. Okay? Okay. Okay, so we said grief. The destruction of your lifelong image of your parents can elicit powerful feelings of loss and abandonment. I want you to approach the material in this book at your own pace. If some of the work makes you feel uncomfortable, give it plenty of time. What's important here is progress, not speed. To illustrate the concepts in this book, I've drawn heavily on case histories from my practice. Some have been directly transcribed from tape recordings, while I've reconstructed others from my notes. All the letters in this book are from my files and have been reproduced exactly as they were written. The unrecorded therapy sessions I've reconstructed are still vivid in my memory, and I've made every effort to recreate them just as they occurred. Only names and identifying circumstances have been changed for legal reasons. None of these cases has been dramatized. These cases may seem sensational, but in fact, they're typical. I did not search my files for the most provocative or dramatic cases. Rather, I chose cases that most clearly represent the types of stories I hear every day. The issues I will raise in this book are not aberrations of the human condition. They're part of it. That's important, you know, because when sometimes, especially if you're in individual therapy and you're not in a group, you're just doing one-on-one therapy, you tend to think that there's something like, once you start getting into it, there's something like seriously wrong with you. You start really beating yourself up and like, oh, this is horrible, this is hideous. And so when you're in a group therapy session, in addition to the individual, you can see, oh, wait a minute, I'm not alone here. We all have something that's part of what being human is. You know, so it normalizes it. And I think that's what she's trying to say here. The book is divided into 2 sections. In the first, we'll examine how different types of toxic parents operate. We'll explore various ways in which your parents might have hurt you and might still be hurting you. This understanding will prepare you for the second section, in which I'll give you specific behavioral techniques to enable you to reverse the balance of power in your relationships with your toxic parents. The process of diminishing the negative power of your parents is a gradual one, but it will eventually release your inner strength, the self that's been hiding all these years, the unique and loving person that you were meant to be. Together, we'll help free that person so that your life can finally be your own. Nice. Very nice. God-like parents. Let's get into it. Ready? God-like parents. The myth of the perfect parent. All right, let's hear about it. The ancient Greeks had a problem. The gods looked down from their ethereal playground atop Mount Olympus and passed judgment on everything the Greeks were up to. And if the gods weren't pleased, they were swift to punish. They didn't have to be kind. They didn't have to be just. They didn't even have to be right. In fact, they could be downright irrational. Sounds like parents. At their whim, they could turn you into an echo or make you push a boulder uphill for all eternity. See, at their whim. To them it was nothing, you know? Nothing. And it can like just break your spirit, right? They would be sometimes the punishment would be so harsh if you had this authoritarian type, right? But for them it was their whim. In other words, they're not having any empathy to what they put you through. Needless to say, the unpredictability of these powerful gods sowed quite a bit of fear and confusion among their mortal followers, not unlike many toxic parent-child relationships. An unpredictable parent is a fearsome god in the eyes of a child. When we're very young, our godlike parents are everything to us. Without them, we would be unloved, unprotected, unhoused, and unfed, living in a constant state of terror, knowing we were unable to survive alone. They are our all-powerful providers. We need and they supply. So that's really heavy, right? When you realize they might not had your best interests at heart at all. They were too caught up in their own stuff, their own feelings, their own needs, and that's who we're seeing as gods. This last little paragraph there, was all put in red by Babaji. I'll just read it again because he's highlighting that as a very important point. When we're very young, our godlike parents are everything to us. Without them, we would be unloved, unprotected, unhoused, and unfed, living in a constant state of terror, knowing we were unable to survive alone. That's terrifying, isn't it? When you think about what all of us went through as kids, whoever you got as parents, you were just at their mercy, even for being fed. You know? I mean, imagine if your parent is neglectful. They're not paying attention to actually when you're hungry. You know? They hear a baby's cry. Babies have different cries. There's a cry of pain and a cry of hunger and a cry of tiredness and a cry of like, I just want some attention. So you think the neglectful mother is going to notice that? The baby could be crying out of so much pain in their stomach because they're very, very hungry. And different babies have different, you know, more pitta or less, right? More hunger or less, or vata. Sometimes you're hungry, sometimes you're not. Or kapha can go a long time for hunger, but maybe they need more snuggling. You know, like you think the neglectful mother or the permissive mother or the authoritarian mother is paying attention to that? Not at all. So from the beginning, we got the message that our needs were too much. If you had a parent like that, a mother like that. You just got to pipe it down, you know, pipe down. And even, like I told you guys before, sometimes the baby just stops crying altogether. Gives up, you know. But other times it just cries, but it never gets, you know. I worked with so many kids before I worked at the psychiatric hospital, you know, and other situations with kids, and it was very sad to see how neglected they were emotionally with their basic needs, you know. I mean, maybe actually one time I worked at this place. It's probably not popular now, but when I worked there, it was called Club Med, and it was a resort. It was a resort you could go to, and it was the chain of resorts around the world called Club Med, and they were famous because they were like destination resorts, and they would have babysitting clubs type of thing. So like the parents would come, like party, dance all night, and then there's the babysitting club, and you could drop the kids off, you know, at the resort. But so they didn't really have to be bothered by their kids, and they could have a fun night out, getting drunk or whatever else. So as part of when I was an undergraduate, I wanted to learn as much as I could about kids, so I went and worked there, you know, as part of my training. I said, let me work at this club and see what they do with the kids, and let me apply what I'm learning in my college there. And I remember one of the days, they said, okay, your job today is you have to sit in this dark room where all the babies are, and they're going to be sleeping. It's their nap time. You know, but it was dark. I couldn't see them. And they have to lay there for like an hour. And I heard this one baby crying so loud, and it was not a cry like a fussy cry, I can't get to sleep. It was shrieking. It was shrieking. So I said, I left the room and I said around the corner, the supervisor, there's a baby shrieking in there. It's not a normal cry. And they said, oh, those kids, they're just, yeah, nothing. It's no big deal. And I said, no, it's bad. I think something's wrong with that baby. And I had to say it multiple times because they have to come in and like turn the lights on and everything. And the baby had fallen and his teeth fell out and it was bleeding, pool of blood. That's what I'm saying is a baby can't talk. You have to pay attention to the cry. If the baby's shrieking at the top of its lung, obviously it's a problem. But these were teenagers working at a kids club. You think they care? They probably were hungover. You see what I'm saying? So, and the parents didn't care because they just dropped them there. They're like, whatever. They didn't even probably pay attention to who the caregivers were. They just wanted to have fun. So much of that neglect is, it's very sad if you watch, actually, if you see just how kids are treated. And oftentimes, you can do it when you're at the airport waiting for your flight, or at the bus station, train station. See how kids are treated. They're treated like a sack of potatoes. They're just pulled along. If they're crying, then this kid is so annoying. Oh, and then they drag the kid sometimes, instead of being like, oh, are you hungry? Are you tired? Sometimes they'll lose their toy. It'll just, and they won't, the parent, they're crying because they lost their toy that they're attached to, their stuffed animal. That's what I'm saying. It's very hard to be an attuned parent if you weren't attuned to. And to be attuned all the time is super hard, right? So getting into this role of being a parent is no joke. It's like the hardest thing you'll ever do, but yeah. Anyway, so that's why we have our parents on this pedestal, They're godlike, they can do nothing wrong, and they're all powerful providers. That's all true. That is 100% true in your childhood. But the problem is we don't change our thinking as adults. It's like cemented into our brain in our childhood that that's how our parents are, right? That's our samskaras. But then as an adult, we should be like, actually, no, they had problems. They ignored me, they neglected me. But that's a very hard change to make. That's where a lot of people get stuck. So these next two paragraphs, the top of page 16, Babaji also put in red. With nothing and no one to judge them against, we assume that our parents are to be perfect parents. And our world broadens beyond as our world broadens beyond our crib, we develop a need to maintain this image of perfection as a defense against the great unknowns we increasingly encounter. As long as we believe our parents are perfect, then we feel protected. We feel safe. As a kid, of course, right? Because if they're not perfect, how anxious would you be? If you realize, imagine you had superpowers and you could realize you had so much intelligence as a baby that you're like, oh, I'm screwed with these parents. They're not paying attention at all. I'm out of here. And you're 2 years old and you pack up your bags and you hitchhike out of town. Right? So that'd be scary because you probably wouldn't go to a nice place. You see what happens to kids who run away? Runaway kids? Not a pretty story at all. They end up, being taken advantage of by adults. So you're kind of, in a way, you're just completely defenseless and completely ignorant about what's really going on. So you can feel safe and protected, basically. So it's a defense mechanism. In our second and third years of life, we begin to assert our independence. We resist toilet training and we revel in our terrible twos. We embrace the word no because it allows us to exercise some control over our lives. Whereas yes is simply an acquiesce. It's just going along with what they want, right? So 2-year-olds are famous at just being like, no, no, no. And why? So that's what they like to do, But that's part of their development. Some people actually still behave like that as adults because their inner child hasn't grown up yet. The people who are constantly questioning, why, they haven't actually probably been pacified in the way they needed to be at 2, at age 2. So they're stuck in the why. And then there's other people who are like, no, probably because when they said it as a kid, they weren't listened to. So they're still like, no, Okay. Okay, we struggle to develop a unique identity, establish our own will. The process of separating from parents reaches its peak during puberty and adolescence, when we actively confront parental values, tastes, and authority. In a reasonably stable family, parents are able to withstand much of the anxiety that these changes create. For the most part, they will attempt to tolerate, if not exactly encourage, their child's emerging independence. The expression, "it's just a phase," becomes a standard assurance for understanding parents who remember their own teenage years and appreciate rebellion as a normal stage of emotional development. So that's news to a lot of people, right? Because as teenagers, if you had one of those types of parents who's toxic, you didn't learn, it was not comfortable for you to be like rebelling against them or saying no or doing your own thing or going through a phase where you were being a little bit bad. You weren't being the perfect little child, That's how you individuate. You start spending a lot more time with your friends, a lot more time out with your friends, and maybe you're going out late nights, and maybe you do some stupid things. That's part of being a teenager. I'm not saying it's great. Believe me, like I think it would be I'd be biting my nails the whole time being a parent of a teenager, because it's hard to trust, that they know what they're doing when they get behind the wheel and they're, you're like, oh God, they're going out at night, I'm worried. It's normal, but at the same time you have to tolerate and give them the space to basically show all the good parenting you've already done for them. Because you've put in 16 years of good samskars, 15 years of good samskars, they should be pretty solid by the time they're that age. I mean, their hormones are going crazy, so they're probably going to make some bad decisions, but you talk it through with them, but they can deliberate, they understand, that's not a good idea, that's not safe, I'm going to talk it through. Or if they did do something that was a bad idea, they would talk to you about it. I did plenty of really stupid things as a teenager, but I had a good relationship with my mom and dad, so I would tell them. I was like, well, I was driving and my friends were drunk in the car and I'm sorry, but we crashed. Oops. And they were like, oh my God. My dad was like, okay, that was bad. And guess what? You can't drive the car this whole summer. I'm like, but how am I going to get around? So he gave me a consequence, but he didn't make me feel like I'm the world's worst person, normal for a teenager, bad because it was a new car. We didn't get hurt, but still the door got ripped off. So he's like, you can ride your bike. So I had to ride my bike. But the point is, they talked about it with me. They explained. I got consequences for what I did that were not ridiculous. Like, it's not that I can never drive again. I had to prove to them that I could be responsible. And but anyway, so you're gonna do probably stupid things as a teenager if your parents give you enough rope to make those mistakes. But then they're there for you. They talk it through, and they're also in a way proud of you that you're trying. But if you didn't have parents who could give you that space, you're still there for them, and they're crying on your shoulder because now you're a teenager and you're better at hearing their story and supporting them. Maybe you can even take on some of their roles that they need for you, their responsibilities. So yeah. Yes, this idea of your parents are, if they're authoritative, they're understanding, and they remember their own teenage years and how important it is for emotional development to differentiate from your parents at that time. Otherwise, you stay enmeshed with them, and you're more worried about them. Enmeshed means you don't form your own identity, and you're more worried about them and how they feel and what they need. Some people don't even go off to college, even though they're smart and they could. It's like, I couldn't leave my mom. She can't handle my dad alone, so I got to be here, taking care of her. Happens. Many of those kind of stories I hear from my clients. Okay. Where did we end here? Huh? Okay. I'm just folding it over where we ended. Okay, so we're halfway down page 16. So I'm going to stop there. Go ahead, Vilas.
Could you maybe explain the difference between neglectful parenting and parenting style that gives enough rope for teenagers to explore and make stupid mistakes and then learn?
Authoritative.
Yeah. Could you maybe? So now you gave some example of someone crashes the car, it gets broken, then you get some consequences, and but then in contrast, how, like a neglectful parent, how would they?
They probably wouldn't even notice that you crashed the car. And then they might come out if they need to use it. They'd just go. They'd just drive, or they'd call the mechanic to come fix it. But they neglect you. They're not. You're invisible. You are made to feel invisible by them. You don't get. There's no warmth and there's no structure. It's like they're a ghost. Authoritative is the perfect. It has warmth and structure, right? But neglectful is the worst. So there's no warmth and no structure. So it's like. It's almost like nothing can get their attention. That's why some kids, when they're having really, really, really bad, out of control behavior, a lot of times it's because they're trying to get attention from their neglectful parent. And as a teenager, it gets worse. And then you're like, now if I cut myself, maybe they'll see me. If I try to commit suicide, will they finally tell me that they love me? I mean, it's not that blunt, but that's what's driving it, And then the permissive is the next one up from neglectful, right? And they're very warm and loving. They'll be the most favorite parent, but they're not putting structure. So just say you crash the car, they'll be like, oh, honey, I did it too. It's okay. Did you have any beer left in the back seat? Let's have one. Cheers. Like, they're not going to put any discipline. They're just going to be your friend about it, you know, and not give consequences, you know. And then the authoritarian, there's no warmth. They're just going to slam you, but over the top, and be like, "Ah," you know, they might hit you or yell at you, you idiot, you know, there's no room for any mistakes, you know, any experimentation. How could you do that to our car? It costs this amount of money, and now you have to buy a new car. You're the worst, and they'll give you some severe punishment. So like, it ruins your whole childhood, you know, the rest of your teenage years, you know. I think I told that story about my mother. Her father was an Air Force guy, right? And when she was dating, I mean, she was just walking down the street with the guy, and as soon as he heard, he reassigned the guy to Alaska. My mom never saw the guy again, and she was like falling in love with the guy. I mean, she really liked that guy. So that's too severe. And no discussion. She just went to the pool the next day, and the guy wasn't there. So that's authoritarian, you know. It's very cold. No heart, you know, just that's how it is. It's good for a military general, but not a papa. Okay? Okay. Christy, you got a question?
Yes. I was just curious if in all the years and all the clients that you work with, as they start looking at their toxic parents, if they start seeing their own errors or failings as a parent themselves, it might not be the same mistakes, but maybe they're seeing what they did.
Yes.
I wondered about you.
That is very, you know what, people, basically looking at your toxic parents is so painful that it's actually a defense mechanism. So what they'll do is they'll either say, I want to talk about my past life or they'll say, I want to talk about my parents. They skip over their own wound. You know, so yes, that's great if you do, but we're not talking about how you're parenting. And we're not talking about your past life. Those are two ways that people avoid actually feeling the pain of what was done to them. Once we've healed that, great, let's go into your past life. There's people who do past life regression, have a blast. Or let's talk about how you are as a parent, but these are after the fact. It's very painful to look at what was done to you. So yes, it's very common. And then people, when I say, I'm not interested in how you are as a parent right now, shelf it. And they're like, what? But I want to, and it's like, yeah. It's the same thing as like bringing, you know, you're having marital issues, but you want to talk about your wife. It's like, okay, we can do that, but it's not going to change you and what the program in you that needs to be changed, you know?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, you guys. I'll see you next week. I hope you have a good week, and thank you for being here. Haribo.